talk about your boy, your close personal friend, Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier. Next weekend, obviously, McGregor, his first fight since around this time last year when he fought Donald Cowboy Cerrone. For one reason or another, obviously coronavirus being the biggest reason, and Dana White, I suppose, being the second biggest reason. McGregor wanted a fight, and he's kind of putting that behind him. He did a couple of interviews and stuff during the week, and he kind of said that he wants to get through it. And he's been a little bit more bullish about this fight, I think, than he was about the Cowboy fight. You know, he's saying he wants to finish Poirier quicker than he did the first time, and there's a little bit of the old McGregor coming back in terms of trash talk and things like that. Before we get into maybe the breakdown of the fight and everything like that, and it's something I find very hard to like get my head around at times, especially with McGregor in the last while. But how do you think he's looking and kind of sounding in interviews and I know we don't see much of him and you haven't been around him much over the last while and stuff either, but how do you think he's looking and sounding as we are now 8 days away from this fight?
Yeah, well, like usually I'd be more around him, but I'm obviously in Dublin, as I mentioned earlier, so I don't get to see as much. But from the stuff I have seen and from the things I'm hearing he's in phenomenal shape, and you know, basically all the things that you're hearing in public are true. That he's kind of the best tuned he's been in years, if not ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, like to be honest, we talked about him a lot last year, and you know what the mad narratives which he talked about when I interviewed him were about like how was he looking?
Baloney, Sean.
It is baloney, but like the narrative at that time was: is this going to be the same McGregor? You know, is he out partying? Is he out drinking? Is he out doing every sort of thing that under the sun? You know, is he prepared? Do the people still like him? There doesn't seem to be any of that this time. You know, instead this time of people on the streets being asked about, do you still like Conor McGregor? Now we have puff pieces coming out about him, giving PPE to people and stuff like that, which absolutely he deserves because he's done a great job of that over the last year. And there's no questions, like any of the interviews I've seen so far, there's no questions about anything, nefarious or anything going on behind the scenes or anything. So it's really a changed, different story for Conor McGregor this year. Plus, I really think like the lockdown and the quarantine is a real blessing in disguise for McGregor, because he said, I asked him in that interview last year, and loads of people have asked him about it. A big issue for him, I think, was like the fame. When you become one of the most famous sports people in the world, and you're out and you have one person pulling you to this maybe party and one person pulling you to this sponsorship opportunity and podcasts and fucking documentaries and all different sorts of things. It's tough. I'm sure it's really, really tough. And when the quarantine came, all of that kind of went away. Okay, you saw him. He was over in France at one stage, and I think he did a bit of his camp in Portugal and things like that. But you haven't really seen McGregor in the papers much, whether it's the front page, the back page, or the entertainment pages, And that's a very good sign, I think. Obviously, he wanted to fight in the middle of the year, and he was kind of in the gym a little bit, and we saw him kind of getting ready, and then nothing happened, and then he seems to have been in the gym for a long time again, being out in Portugal and being in Dublin as well, and now obviously out in Dubai, and now he's going to be moving over to UAE here probably maybe today or tomorrow and stuff. I as someone just kind of looking at it from the outside in, I feel like that's a bit of a blessing for him. Do you think it's the same? Do you, like McGregor at the start? I remember I think it was one of the documentaries. He was like, I'm obsessed with MMA and that's all I do. I go from my house to the gym and maybe to get something to eat and back then again. And that's all he's really been able to do over the last year because of lockdown. Do you think that might be a bit of a blessing in disguise for him?
Yeah, as you mentioned there, like, court cases, and that's a lot of mental strain to be hanging over somebody, like a lot of stress and uncertainty and all that stuff. And that was still kind of going on leading into the Cowboy fight and the Cowboy kind of return fight or comeback fight, as they were calling it. And I'd say there was a lot of kind of stress involved with that. But now all those court cases seem to be, gone, and everything seems to be, looking up for McGregor. Obviously, your interview with Dan Hardy's coming out soon, and he mentioned that he thinks that Cerrone in the Cerrone fight build up, Conor kind of played down or just kind of stayed quiet to kind of throw off Cerrone and let him get into his own head and not give him what he was expecting. in those kind of, like Cerrone was obviously through previous experience expecting a lot of kind of trash talk and didn't get it, and got kind of a whole different face in those media obligations in the build up. So I don't know if I agree with that, but like maybe there's a little bit of that. But I think, all the stress and strain going on with all that stuff has to be a big weight on any fighter or any athlete or any normal person. So yeah, I think obviously McGregor's obviously in better shape now as well, because he's kind of continued on after Cerrone, where in the past he might win a fight like that against Cerrone and disappear for a while. This time he seems to have stuck to it, and he's posting loads of pictures and stuff on social media, and looks in really great shape, and everything I'm hearing is he's in really great shape. And obviously Poirier is going to be in really great shape as well. But the kind of thing with McGregor is that a lot of people ask is, oh yeah, but which McGregor's going to turn up? Is he going to be focused? Does he still want it? And I think a lot of people will probably suspect in this, or are expecting in this fight, a finely tuned McGregor, and I think that's what they're going to get. And Poirier, obviously, like, he's a great fighter, but I think one of the promos kind of says there's levels to this, like, and we kind of saw that with Max Holloway tonight. Like, there is like, when you see like a performance like that, Max Holloway performance, or an even better performance like that, Conor McGregor, Eddie Alvarez performance, you just realize how many levels there are to this, and the very best guys sometimes have a lot of levels to go to that the very, very good guys don't.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and we'll get into the fight in a second. But as a kind of transition to talk about the fight, I think it's important kind of to close that up a little bit, where it dominated the talk, I think, last time, about McGregor and his preparation. And I don't think it's obviously we were still entering fight week, so maybe it's something that will be pushed, but it hasn't really been pushed on. I think I kind of had to mention that, thinking about the topics we're kind of going to talk about that fight. I think that's a very important one. So you're looking at McGregor, and, he's mentioned this week in interviews he did with the Khabib fight that he wasn't in the right place, and, injured and out partying and stuff like that. So that can't be, not necessarily an excuse, but we look at McGregor coming in here, and that is what the sort of preparation he needed. And as we transition over to the fight here,
there's no way in this press conference he's going to be drinking proper 12 on the stage, like, well, weight cutting. It's just a different
mindset, isn't it?
Mindset. Yeah.
The one big thing as well, as we transition kind of over to the fight, 155 for me. I'm so delighted this fight is at 155. McGregor speaking about wanting to keep fighting at 155. Obviously, he's mentioned the Pacquiao fight in boxing as well, and he'd be happy to fight Nate at 170 if he fought him there. But he's, like the season kind of thing last year, that I think what he wants to do, what's foremost in his mind is fighting again and keeping fighting at 155. Like, it seems to be a weird thing to say, and I say it a lot, and maybe the stats don't back it up or whatever, but I think 155 is his best weight class. Now, he went through Jose Aldo in 13 seconds at 145, and he beat Chad Mendes, and he beat Max Holloway, and he beat Dustin Poirier, and he beat Dennis Seaver, and he beat Diego Brandao, and I'm probably forgetting someone, but he beat all of those guys with relative ease. Poor Marcus Crimmage, sorry Marcus, at 145. But I think there was always that thought, and especially, like, I remember at the UFC Dublin weigh-ins, he came out to be weighed in. I was like, oh, there's Paddy Hoolan. I'm like, oh wait, no, it's actually Conor McGregor. he was so sucked out, and he looked so bad. Like, I think he actually looked worse than he actually was. I think a lot of it comes from his face, and his nutritionists and stuff have talked about that before, but he looked so bad at 145, and then he went up. Obviously, he went up to 170 and came back down, but when he fought Eddie Alvarez at 155, it just looked like the apex of MMA almost. It was one of the most dominant displays we've ever seen in a UFC title championship matchup. It was just unbelievable.
And the last time we'd seen him at 155 was the
Dave Hill fight, wasn't it?
No, the Buchinger fight.
Was it Buchinger? Oh, yeah, Buchinger, yeah.
Absolute masterclass as well. Obviously, the best title fight in Cage Warriors, or the best title performance in Cage Warriors history as well. So, it was a lot of kind of evidence pointing towards 155 being his best weight. And obviously, he looks like he's, in shape. And at 155, he has the correct nutrition, the correct muscle for what he needs to not have to, nearly kill himself making the weight like he did at 145, or not be bloated to make 170 like he was in the first Diaz fight. So yeah, I think even though he's lost to Habib there, I think there was like circumstances around that he wasn't in the same kind of focus as he has been previously, and looks to be in again. So yeah, I think 155 is definitely his best weight class.
Plus Habib is pretty good as well. So there's no shame even if you're at the best losing him. But I think the same probably goes for Poirier, actually. I think, he's a big 155er now, and he spoke like McGregor about going to 170. I know McGregor has gone to it, but Poirier has spoken before. Obviously, he has fought at 145. And watching his fights, as we get into maybe the analysis of the fight a little bit here, I think what Poirier has done and what he has adjusted since he has lost to McGregor and since he was at 145 is down to that move, I think, a lot. Because I think the extra 10 pounds for Poirier, more than I think anyone that I can think of in the history of the UFC, has helped his chin so much. He can afford to be a little bit more reckless. He can afford to throw a few more shots. He can afford to kind of rely on his chin a little bit more at 155, or a lot more even at 155 than he did at 145. Now, this weekend he's fighting maybe the best knockout artist we've ever seen at those combined two weight classes, so it's a little bit of a different story. But still, I don't think it'll.
And he was knocked out early, but I know it was a few years ago by Michael Johnson in the first round as well. So I wouldn't be relying on my chin too much in this fight.
No, indeed, but I think Poirier, like the way he uses, the way he fights. If you have, McGregor said it before the first fight, and it turned out to be absolutely correct going into it. Like, a gust of wind comes and it knocks him over, puts him down on one knee, and like that. Okay, that wasn't necessarily true, but it was a bit like that. Like Poirier he got knocked down by Akira Kurosani, if I'm not mistaken, in one of his fights and things like that. And like no matter what you think of Poirier, I don't think anyone thinks he's on that level or should be getting knocked down by someone like that. So. I think he's a totally different fighter in that realm because of it, and I think him moving up to 155 brings huge advantages with it, and it's allowed him, I think, to develop his game. Now Poirier, for me, has developed into a really, really good fighter all the way around. One thing I really want to mention here before we get into the striking, because the striking will be obviously the main analysis and breakdown here. Poirier's wrestling and jiu-jitsu are very good as well. Every fight that McGregor's ever lost has been by submission. So you cannot look past someone who has some good submission wins on his career. I know it's a good while back now since he got most of them for Poirier, but in that Joseph Duffy fight, we saw that where Duffy was doing okay on the field. I watched it back this week, and Poirier was able to change levels, take him down. Now McGregor has very, very good takedown defense as well, which, okay, you look at the Habib fight and maybe you wouldn't think that, but if you look at all his other fights, I think most people who are kind of unbiased and looking at him see that. So it won't be easy to take him down, but if you can draw him into a little bit and get a takedown and put him on the ground, that's a big way forward for Poirier. So, as we saw, and I'm sure we'll get to the Matt Brown-Carlos Condit fight, that happened a little bit in that fight with Matt Brown in the first round, and that could be something Poirier looks at. But for me, the kind of the striking of Poirier, like, I think he's developed his jab into such a great weapon that people are kind of afraid of it a little bit, and he can use his chin a little bit more because of that, because they know what's kind of coming after it. And obviously fighting out of southpaw position as well is a big issue for a lot of people, something which I asked Dan Hardy about it tomorrow, and he gave a way better answer than I gave, so that's coming out tomorrow on SevereMMA. But like, do you think Poirier's the way he's striking has developed? Like, I think his striking has developed a little bit more. Obviously he was doing a lot of jabbing and a lot of left hands coming behind it and going to the body and stuff, but I think he's gone, especially in the Hooker fight most recently, he's got turned into a little bit like McGregor, which obviously we'll get to McGregor in a second, but McGregor is very much, I think, a kind of an attacking counter fighter. He walks forward, throws things to make you strike, and then kind of counters you. I think Poirier has gone a little bit like that. What challenges do you think that brings to McGregor if Poirier is going to come out doing that, trying to draw McGregor out maybe a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think Conor, he was kind of known as a counter fighter before, but he's well able to do both. I think, especially with his hands. So yeah, like for Poirier, obviously he's made a lot of improvement. I think around the time of maybe in one of the embeddeds or something like that, around the time of the first fight, you could see in the videos how hard it was for Poirier to make the weight. Obviously, it was very hard for McGregor to make the weight as well. But for Poirier, it seemed like it was even more difficult, even though the kind of aesthetics of it would indicate otherwise. And he kind of said, I don't know if it was straight after the fight or before his next fight, that he spent so much time worrying about the weight and cutting weight and doing everything about the weight that he couldn't train properly, couldn't evolve. And I think that happens to a lot of guys when they fight too regularly and have to cut a lot of weight. So I think like he's obviously a completely different fighter than he was. You mentioned the chin, you mentioned all that stuff. His boxing has improved a lot. His ability to mix in wrestling and jiu-jitsu. But I just everywhere, every route to victory, just kind of, I think Conor's better everywhere. If he comes in with takedown attempts that aren't like Khabib's, where they're constantly chained together and all this stuff, he's just going to eat punishment. I think
those elbows.
Stuff like that, and it's going to be very difficult early to pin McGregor down in any way. I just don't really. Obviously, he's made a lot of improvements and all that stuff. When he hits hard, he proved that in the first fight. Like, he cracked Conor a couple of times, and it was only minute and 30 seconds, a minute and 36
like that,
seconds. It didn't go long, but he didn't get completely blown out of the water in the first minute anyway. Like, he's definitely a game fighter and all that, but anything can happen in MMA and all that. But I just really see Conor superior everywhere. Like, I think Conor's jiu-jitsu is better. Obviously, his striking is better. He's been working with Phil Sutcliffe and the boxing lads again now for a year now, more. Tightening up his boxing even more. I think if anybody is going to have even more improved boxing than the last time we saw his boxing, it's probably going to be Conor, not Poirier. Like, I think Conor's boxing was on another level at the time when they first fought, and it's improved more now, I'd say. So it's a really difficult fight for Poirier, I think, to win.
You think McGregor has better jiu-jitsu than Dustin Poirier?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Do you? How come? Like, we haven't seen. You've seen probably a good bit of it, but we haven't seen much.
Just the time we've seen his jiu-jitsu fail is when he was very tired or already rocked. And I think even if you look at the Diaz fight, there's a sweep there where Diaz goes for a takedown and Conor lands on top at the end of the first round.
Yeah.
I think everybody can say that Diaz, like, obviously has his deficiencies in MMA, but he's definitely very good on the ground. And if you can, and I've seen him, a lot of rolling, a lot of jiu-jitsu over the years. Like, you wouldn't believe how much, a lot. And his jiu-jitsu is extremely good. Like if he put the gi on and did classes, like, I've no doubt he'd get a black belt from John. Like, if he made it that his goal to do in 2 months, he'd have that.
Really? That's crazy. Yeah, he has the brown belt, hasn't he? Didn't John give it to him after his one fight? So yeah, that's interesting to me, and it'll be interesting if it does go there. I think a lot of people kind of like to see that, I suppose, a little bit with McGregor when he's fresh gone to the ground, but we rarely see that unless it's against Khabib, obviously just kind of holding him down in that kind of 3/4 month.
He did nullify.
He defended
more than other people have in early rounds in the Khabib fight. And the Max Holloway fight, obviously he hurt his knee and had to kind of turn to jiu-jitsu and completely dominated there, with some nice wrestling mixed in as well. So, like, we've kind of seen glimpses of it, and the kind of memorable things are when he was tired and gassed out, and his jiu-jitsu was kind of how he lost. So obviously that was sticking in people's mind, but haven't seen a lot more of a sample size. I think his jiu-jitsu is extremely good.
And I suppose, like, that's the one thing as well you mentioned there about getting gassed out. That's probably the biggest area in which we see deficiencies from McGregor. Okay, I'm going to talk more in a minute about Poirier's deficiencies, and especially when we get to the striking, how I think we both probably think McGregor will win, but like, if you're Poirier and you're looking, how do I win this fight? You're probably looking at that. You're probably looking like, okay, survive the early storm. McGregor says he's going to come out and knock him out in the first 60 seconds. First of all, survive that, and then survive the next 60 seconds, and then the next 3 minutes after that, and get into the second round, and make McGregor a little bit more tired. Take away the pop from his shots a little bit more. Now, McGregor might still have the same pop in his shots in the 5th round. Who knows? Where it's a lot of guesswork and talking about what we've seen in the past. We've only seen McGregor twice in the last 4 years, so who knows? What his conditioning is like. He's in those two fights, and especially after the Floyd Mayweather bout, he talked about the McGregor fast program, and it was all about conditioning basically with him, over the last few years. So we haven't really seen that tested. Obviously, the Cowboy fight only lasted 40 seconds. So in the last year, that's all we've seen from McGregor. So how will his conditioning look? So obviously that's an addendum. I'll throw onto that there. But if you're Dustin Poirier, you want to pull out that addendum and test it and see if it's correct. So I think that's what Poirier needs to do here. Obviously, maybe push McGregor into the cage, get a couple of takedowns early, wear him out. Don't let McGregor strike with you in open water where he can land lots of strikes. We'll get into the striking more in a second, but I think that's what Poirier needs to do. I think that's what Poirier's game plan will be. I think Poirier will be smart about it. I think he's in one of the best gyms in the world with some of the best tacticians in the world, Mike Brown and everyone else there as well. So I think that's what Poirier will be trying to do. But if you look at some of Poirier's fights recently, especially, I mentioned he's kind of become more of an attacking counter fighter as well, with a little bit more reliance on his jab maybe than McGregor. McGregor jabs a lot, but he jabs in kind of more of an attacking way after he's thrown his kicks and things like that and tried to draw you out by walking forward. So if you look at, say, the Eddie Alvarez fight for Conor McGregor, that's what Alvarez did a little bit. Now, I think Poirier is a superior striker to Alvarez. I think he's faster, more accurate, more powerful in every way, and obviously fights out of the southpaw position as well, so it'll be a little bit different. But I think McGregor can beat Poirier in that way. I think McGregor can beat Poirier in getting Poirier to throw shots, avoiding him and countering him and being faster. We'll talk about Max Holloway a little bit later on. Now, he didn't do that as much, Holloway, but he was so much faster than Kattar. He just destroyed him and dismantled him from second one. I think that's what McGregor will try to be against Poirier. You said he's working with boxing coaches. Obviously, he prepared for Floyd Mayweather. He's worked on loads on boxing over the last few years. If his hands are faster than they've ever been, I think it'll be the perfect thing for Dustin Poirier, and I think he'll land lots of shots. I think Poirier's chin has improved, as I said earlier on. I definitely stand by that, but there's only so much you can take if McGregor is hitting you like that. Now, if Poirier can land, and if Poirier can get his jab going, and he can move his head and keep away from those McGregor shots, and if McGregor's hitting air, he absolutely can knock McGregor out too, because Poirier hits really, really hard. These guys are two hard fucking hitters. I said earlier on, arguably McGregor is one of the hardest hitters in those two divisions either. Poirier is in that argument as well, make no mistake about that. He hits really, really, really hard, and he can catch McGregor as well. But I just think that speed will be a little bit different from McGregor. I think, it's funny with McGregor because he kicked the legs a lot against Diaz in that fight, and I think a lot of that was down to him not wanting to throw a lot of those high and flashy kicks that he threw down at 145. But prior to that, because of, I think, the gas tank, it'll be interesting to see what he does at 155. Will he throw more of those high kicks? Will he throw more of those spinning kicks? Will he throw more of those leg kicks? Or will he have more confidence maybe in his cardio going long in that fight? It'll be interesting because I remember I was on a conference call with him once and I asked him basically that exact question, and he goes, I paint many pictures. So it's, I'd say even if I was speaking to begin and asked him again, I probably wouldn't get a straight answer. We probably won't get an answer until around this time next week when we're watching him in the cage against Poirier. But what do you think on that? Like the striking matchup itself and McGregor, like do you think McGregor will be coming out throwing flashy kicks and things like that, or do you think it'll be more of a boxing match this time?
Yeah, I think it'll probably be more of a boxing match early anyway. Like if it starts going long, Conor always likes to work the body, and in all of his fights as well, he mixes it up well. Like the leg kicks, maybe they're not standard leg kicks like Muay Thai leg kicks, but he's always touching the leg and all that stuff. So I don't think he'll abandon that completely or anything, but I don't expect like the Brandao fight where he's throwing spinning hook kicks and spinning heel kicks and all this stuff. If the opportunity arises, he's a fighter that will adapt. He won't stick to a game plan or anything like that. It's so strict that he won't kind of read it himself as it happens. And he's obviously his fight IQ is very high as well. So, but I don't think that's going to be the game plan or anything to go out there and bring back the spinning heel kicks and spinning hook kicks like constantly.
So what's the prediction? What do you think? McGregor first round KO?
Yeah, I think so. Like Poirier is obviously, he's very tough and all, but if he It could go into like a second round, but first or second round, I think probably first.
Yeah, like we'll obviously doing the betting show over on Patreon. It's going to be a huge week on Patreon. I have a lot of guests lined up, so patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. And we have the betting show out Friday evening, all going well. And, maybe give the final pick for that. But I just think that speed again will be too much for Poirier, and I think the power of McGregor obviously is unbelievable to add to that speed as well. So yeah, my prediction at this stage is I think McGregor maybe round 2 KO, round 1 or round 2. So, but I think it'll be a more competitive fight this time. I think McGregor. Sometimes we look at Conor McGregor and we think he's the cockiest man to ever live, and it's easy to do that, I suppose, because he's a pretty cocky fucking man, in fairness. But I was on Submission Radio there a while back, and they asked me about like having no crowd there and stuff, and obviously there is a crowd there now. But the answer I kind of gave to them was I'm looking forward to seeing Conor McGregor as a fighter, with just his fight ability there, and nothing about like what's going on outside the cage, or nothing about his fame or his fortune or anything like that. Like what I love, and I think what you love as well, and we love a bit of the other stuff as well, and a bit of the entertainment, whatever. But I love watching fights, and I love talking about fights like this, and seeing how it'll break down fighter A versus fighter B. And I feel like McGregor, more than anyone else, doesn't get enough. Maybe credit is the wrong word, but enough talk about his game and about how good he is, and his deficiencies even, and things that he does to win fights, and how he wins fights, and how he's changed up and improved his game over the last while. And that was something I was kind of looking forward to seeing, and maybe enjoying a little bit more with no crowd maybe backing it up. But I still think we will see a little bit of that more than ever before. And if he is improved as he says he is, and if he is as on it as it looks like his preparations would suggest that he will be, I think it'll be another great performance from McGregor. And if not, we have to readjust, because he's only fought, as I said, 40 seconds of a winning fight in the last good few years. So maybe he's not the fighter he once was. We will find out on Saturday night. But I think McGregor at his best, I think he knocks out Poirier in a couple of rounds. If he's not at his best, Poirier, as we mentioned earlier on, is absolutely good enough to land big shots on McGregor. So I'm really looking forward. I think it'll be a very, very fun fight.